Hello, everybody. This is Mo with Unsung Gridiron Legends Facebook page. If you are a high school football star or pro or college and you're looking for a place to share your memories, come check out Unsung Gridiron Legends on Facebook. Today, we have a very special guest with us today. We have Mr. Shawn Crow. He is an Odessa Permian High legend. For those of you who don't know about Odessa Permian, that was the school and the football team that was depicted in the movie Friday Night Lights. Shawn, how are you today, man?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm awesome, man. I'm so happy that you're here, and it's been nice talking to you over the last few days, and I appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much.
No, no worries. Thank you for having me.
So Shawn, let's start off like up here in PA and in other parts. I'm sure other parts of the country. Texas football is looked at, is perceived as just like this big, huge thing, almost like it's almost like being in Division One in high school. What's your take on that whole thing about Texas football?
But the funny thing is to say that everything in Texas is a little bit bigger. Same seems to ring true with that one. Especially when I think of high school football and the way media was in the 80s. We didn't have all these smartphones, and you couldn't stream the games and stuff like that. So if you wanted to see it live,
Right.
you had to be there. And out in West Texas, we'd have anywhere 18 to 20,000 people almost every game,
Mm.
regardless of who you were playing.
Wow.
So it was big, back in the 80s. Now they stream games and stuff like that. I don't
Right.
know how it
Right.
is up there in Pennsylvania, but they still get pretty good crowds, even with the streaming.
Right.
And of course, if it's a rivalry, it's sold out. So
Right. Right. So let's talk about the city and state you're from, and tell me a little bit about your hometown.
So I was originally born actually in Dallas, but we moved at a very early age out to West Texas and Odessa, Texas.
Okay.
So from like the third grade on, I was actually in Odessa, so I was raised out there. Odessa is oil field. Uh, it's more of the people who are actually doing the work, not the people who are in the office. So it's a little bit different, a lot similar to what you hear from Texas. Our perception of, like, say, Pennsylvania is I believe it's the blue collar. you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
we're the ones out there doing the labor. So we've been insulted many a times by the media and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a different breed out there in West Texas. We take pride, I guess, in the fact that we do that kind of work, and we work hard for a living, our parents and everybody like that.
Right. Was Odessa like suburban, or would you consider it rural, more rural, or was it like an urban setting?
It, so it feels like it's a rural area, but it's 100,000 people.
Hmm.
20 miles away is Midland, and it was like 100,000 people. So,
Okay.
within that area, you've got 200,000 people.
Right.
Well, you go 2.5 hours to the north, and Lubbock's like 750,000, I think, or 350,000. El Paso is 5 hours to the west, and it's I want to say, if it's not 750, it's like a million. And then you go 5 hours to the east, and I don't have to tell you how big Fort Worth, Texas is.
Right. 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 Right.
So we're kind of in the middle of nowhere with a whole bunch of really small towns of like 5,000, 4,000, 10,000 around us. But that makes us the big city kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay. Okay. So tell me about your family a little bit. Did you grow up with both parents, one parent, any siblings?
I did grow up with both parents. I had two older brothers. That's probably, as I would like to say, that probably why I was as fast as I was, because one of the brothers was 8 years older and the other one was 18 months older.
Okay.
And when you're the youngest child, you like to start trouble. And, well, if you're going to do something, you better run away or get beat up. Uh, I did grow up with both parents working. So, I didn't have that luxury as some people, but Both my parents worked, so when I got home, that's why I said I could get in trouble, because
Right, right,
you
right.
make your brothers mad, your parents ain't there to stop them.
Anything you learned from your parents that you still sticks with you today that carries you in life?
I think my parents always instilled in me to try to be humble and just work as hard as I could for the stuff that I wanted, and don't give up, and know that there's going to be some heartaches along the way. There might even be some setbacks, but don't give up, and get up every day. And as they might say in Texas, put your boots on. You put your pants on one leg at a time, and put your
Right,
boots on and go to work.
right,
You
right.
know. So,
So tell me about when you got into sports. Like, did you play youth sports? If so, what sports?
so I got into it, and it's it's kind of strange. So my middle brother is 18 months older than me. And so when Pee Wee football came around in uh, fifth grade, fourth grade, something like that, obviously I wasn't technically old enough to play,
Right.
but my dad somehow figured it out, or they did something, and magically I was allowed to play. So I guess if we have to go back and forfeit those games from the Pee Wee years, I guess now's the time for them to go do it.
Right, 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 right.
But so I got started at an early age, and had some good coaches along the way, um, as far as the Pee Wee goes and stuff like that. So
So when do you guys like when you were coming up? When do you start playing for like the school, and how much of it's like in a youth league? How does it?
So the Pee Wee leagues basically go up to like the sixth grade years in Odessa. Now I don't know if that's changed, but I know that's definitely how it was when I was there. The seventh grade was your first year of actual organized football, getting ready to go to the high school.
Okay.
And what was unique about it was the head coach at the varsity,
Uh-huh.
at Permian, made the coaches. I think he made them. I'm not sure, but I know they all ran the same offense. So
Mm,
you learned in seventh grade the same plays you'd be running as a senior.
mm.
So from seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, you were running the exact same plays. Now they could tweak them a little, and stuff like
Right,
that.
right, right,
But for the most part, you were running, I'm going to say 70% of the offense
right,
in
right,
seventh grade that you were running in, as a junior or senior.
right, right.
So,
How serious would you say like the youth sports were in Texas? Was that very
uh,
serious?
yeah, I mean, um, I can't name names because I don't remember them. It's been that long ago. But
Right.
to give you an example, back in the Pee Wee level, which would be the sixth grade and younger. I remember a father one time coming out there because his kid wasn't um, playing well. Now, to say that football is a violent sport, so you've
Mhm.
got to have a certain mentality to play it.
Right.
He just didn't have it, is the best way to describe it. And here his dad is trying to like literally pull his belt off and whip his kid for not being like the best one out there. And you're like, are you serious? Like, but that's also where I step in and say our coaches did a real good job, and other parents of saying, look, you know, they didn't really want to get involved, but at the same time, they're like, you're not whipping your kid out here in front of everybody. You're just
Right.
not.
Right.
Your kid, if your kid's going to play on this team, you're not going to be able to behave like this,
Right.
because
Right.
we can't have that. So
Right.
at that age, we still had parents who would interject to the parents that were being a little overzealous,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Right.
Um, and it just kind of, to say that parents were staying involved all the way through the process was absolutely true.
Right.
The higher you got, that I guess you could say you felt like there were politics involved, even though I don't know if there were or were not,
Right.
but it just felt like, some kids would be like, on the team would be like, oh yeah, the only reason so and so is starting is because of his dad, and you're like, I don't know, man, he's really pretty good. I mean,
Pretty good. Pretty good player. Right. Right.
but but it's at times, it's a toss up. And I don't think as players, sometimes you kind of forget that, oh, well, so-and-so is a senior, other guy's a junior, and it could go either way. Well, in the game, they're both playing,
Right,
but the
right,
starter would be the senior, he might
right.
start the game.
But the other guys
And
getting some playing time.
so, and you could hear it, and you could see the friction, you know what I'm saying?
Uh,
But I think our coaches and stuff like that, they did a real good job of, kind of squashing the
oh, okay.
parent, at times. I mean, but it doesn't, you still have it that in the locker room is what I'm saying.
Right, right.
So,
So growing up in Odessa, how did they decide what high school you go to? Was Permian the only high school, or were there different high schools?
no, strangely enough, in I want to say in the early '80s, definitely the late '70s for sure, there was actually three high schools. There was Ector, which was a predominantly black school,
Mhm.
and then you had Odessa High and Odessa Permian. Well,
Okay.
they shut down Ector, and so then they had to bus the kids to, one or the other. And every year, as we would say, is the magic line kind of seemed to move a couple streets to the left or a couple streets to the
Right,
right, and
right, right.
it basically was trying to cut the town from north to south, but it seemed like there was politics that would move that line left or right.
Mm,
And I think that's a good question, because I don't think we discussed this one. I actually lived right on that line, and had they moved that line one block to the east, I wouldn't have gone to Odessa Permian. I would have actually gone to Odessa High.
right.
Um, I don't think they knew it at the time. And then we moved before my senior, junior, and senior year, so they couldn't. I moved a little bit further into Permian's area, so we didn't have that problem then. So,
Right. So did all the kids pretty much grow up dreaming of like, I want to go to Permian High School one day? Was that a dream of yours, like coming up as you were younger?
oh man, to answer the question honestly, no. Uh, my dad graduated from Odessa High. My oldest brother graduated from Odessa High. And so me and my middle brother were the two that were, because of where my dad graduated back in the 50s. And then, of course, he moved to Dallas and stuff like that.
Uh,
But my oldest brother, when we moved back to Odessa, he was like a senior. So he had to go to Odessa High for like his senior year, but he graduated from there.
right,
But we moved shortly after that, because when we first moved there, I was in Odessa High's district. But then of course, remember that was third grade. But by the time our fourth grade and our house and all that kind of got built, we were back in Permian's area.
right, right.
So
So what was up before you came to Permian? What was football like there? Was it already a winning program, already like dominant?
yeah. I think in like 1980 was probably my first recollection of Permian, and they had a great game versus Odessa High, and I think it ended up in a tie. And but based on like penetrations and stuff like that back then, how many times you crossed the 20 was the first tiebreaker.
Mm,
And I believe Permian advanced on that one, and then they went on to state and won. And so then like the next couple years they always made the playoffs, and then
uh-huh.
in 1984 they won state again. In 1985 they lost the state, and then 1986 is my junior year, so
Right,
up to that point we had won three state titles in 5 years and been to the playoffs all five. So expectations were high.
right,
So, and that puts pressure on you, because um, you don't look at your team and say, hey, we've got 20 returning seniors. You
mhm,
look at it and say, man, we're representing ourselves. We'll represent the high school, but we also represent the town.
right,
Because when you get to the big cities of Dallas, Fort Worth, and stuff like that, they kind of like, oh my God, Permian again, like they're here again. And we're like, it's because we had that no quit attitude. We're like, we're going to show you how big our heart is, not how big our players are.
right,
We didn't match up well with Dallas because of the size. We were known. at that point as a team who would probably be losing at halftime by 7 points or 10 points, and we would rally to win in the second half,
Right.
because we would wear you down because we were, all those teams were relatively quick. Now, some teams, most of those games we weren't trailing, but when we played the bigger teams, sometimes we were. So,
Right. Did you start running back from the time you came up sixth, seventh, eighth grade? I mean, did you play running back position or did you play?
had a lot of injuries as a seventh grader, had injuries as an eighth grader, broke my arm as a ninth grader. And then I was actually the tailback on the JV squad. And one of my good friends, I don't know what happened to him. I think he just kind of got I think he got tired of football because it was the practices were so intense and stuff like that.
Right.
And he stepped away from the game. And at that point, they basically said, "You're no longer the tailback. Now you're the fullback."
Okay.
We ran a wing T offense. And in a wing T offense, the majority of the carries go to the fullback.
Right.
It's just kind of how it goes. So yeah, so that's how I became a fullback. And I was 170 pounds in the tailback. James Booby Miles, I hope he doesn't mind me using his name, was 6'2", 205. And you look at that and you say, wait a minute, your fullback's 170, 175 pounds and your tailback's 200. This doesn't make a lot of sense. So,
Right.
but yeah.
What was practice like? Can you just give me a little?
Practice was very intense. The best way I can describe it is if you were playing for the state championship, that's how practices were. Like in order to get that starting position, because everybody wanted to start and everybody wanted to play. So, I don't recall anybody ever taking cheap shots, but you took hits. If you weren't hitting, you weren't going to be on the field.
Right.
So you make too many mistakes, and all of a sudden you're not a starter. You're the second string guy. And they had a policy. I don't know if it was the coaches. I believe it was the coaches. At the varsity level, we had a gate that we had to walk through, that you had to cross like a parking lot, get through the gate to get to the practice fields. And the rule of thumb that I remember was them telling us, hey, look, you get mad at practice and you want to walk away, we get it. We don't like it, but we get it. But if you walk through that gate, you're not coming back. You might as well just turn your pads in and clean your locker when you get there. And I don't know that anybody ever challenged that, but we did have people go through the gate and they never came back. So, they weren't playing around when they said, you walk through that gate, we will play as a team and we'll play with the team that we're given. So you may think you're important, but we will replace you. So,
Right. So game day at Permian High School, what was that like? Like from the schools, from being in school to the game night, what was that? What was that all like?
Repeat that.
Like when you guys had a game, like say Friday night during school, did you guys have like a pep rally?
Oh yeah. So game day was basically consisted of the about 30 minutes to 45 minutes before school started. They would get like the band, the cheerleaders, what we call pipettes, majorettes, just everybody. And they would let the kids come in, the students, and they would fill up the gymnasium. And then, of course, they'd start playing. Permian had a song called Hawaii 5-0. And so they would start playing that when you got to the playoffs. And of course, that's kind of when you would walk in, and we would just kind of walk in and sit down. The captains would go first, and then the rest of the team. I think it was always the captains. Then I want to say maybe the seniors, like they would put you in order like that.
Right.
And then you would just kind of sit there and watch the skits, watch whatever they did, how loud they were and stuff like that.
Right.
The reason they would play Hawaii 5-0, because in the 80s, the high school playoffs only would let one team in. And
Mm.
if you could win 5 games, you actually won state.
Okay.
In about 83, they changed it to where the top 2 teams out of the district would get into the playoffs. And then you needed 5 games to get to the state game. And
Right.
that's kind of how it is still today, except now they
Right.
let a lot more teams in than 2. They let like the top 4, but it still takes 5 games to get to the state championship game. So they
Right.
could not play that song until we got to the playoffs.
Right.
They would not put our name on the back of our jerseys until we
Mm.
got to the playoffs. So
Wow.
there were some incentives to get there, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and of course, yeah. So that was probably the biggest part of it.
What was the atmosphere like in the stadiums, like on game night, like on game nights?
Oh man. You know, I'm going to go to some of the bigger games that we played, some of the bigger rivalries. I mean, it was standing room only, 20,000, 22,000, you know, stuff like that. And
Right.
that's whether, you know, now the other people's, their stadiums weren't quite as big as ours. So when we had to go play them there, those tickets were really hard to get. But when we're playing at home, I mean, the tickets were really hard to get. So they would open up like the grass end zones and sell tickets for people to either stand or sit in the grass.
Wow.
So, and yeah, I think the last game I played in high school was a state semifinal game, and I think they opened it up, and I'm going to say we had somewhere around 22 to 23,000, might have been 21, but somewhere between 21, 23,000 people there.
Right.
So,
Right. So when you're Shawn Crow, a star in Odessa, Texas at that time, how do people around the community treat you when you go around like to the store or to a restaurant or you know?
you know, from my perspective, and it is from my perspective, yeah, you felt like a rock star. I mean, people were interested in what you had to say. You know, you might get a free meal here or there. You know, a lot of parents. So it that put a lot of undue pressure on you, but it kind of felt like being a rock star. You know,
Mhm.
problem is you're 18 years old, 17 years old, and I think that puts a lot of expectations on you when the girlfriend's dad is, well, how many points are you going to score tonight? You know, and you know, man, I don't know. I just go out there and play the game. I hope it turns out well for us, but
Right. Right. Right.
but yeah, they treat you like a rock star. That's for sure.
Right. Any moments you'll never forget from some of the years you played?
Uh, I think, you know, there was a moment when we were practicing my senior year and we it was our backups basically going against our first string defense. We called it 7-on-11. And they slowly started putting people in and that's when I remember like I felt like we became a team that day. Like
Mhm.
just, you know, there was no bickering. No, it was like, man, this is the offense, that's the defense, and this is who we are, and this is what we're going to go to battle with. And um, that sticks out more to me than just about anything. I mean, I had some great games and stuff like that, and I couldn't have done any of that without my offensive line. I mean, uh, to them, my hat's off to them both years, junior and senior year. I mean, I might have got my name in the paper and I might have got the yards and went to college and you know stuff like that, but without playing as a team, I wouldn't have got any of that.
Right.
So I do respect the fact that we could play as a team, and that you know that's what I
Right.
liked about it.
Do you remember how many yards you ran for like your junior year and your senior year? Do you remember
Uh, I might be off a little bit. My junior year was like 1,363 or something like that in like
okay.
9 games. And then my senior year was I think we played 14 games and I had 2,288.
Mm,
So
wow.
and like I was telling you, you know, that at the time it was 5A because 5A was the highest classification in Texas at the time.
Okay.
The reason they're 6A now is because we did away with they didn't do away with 6-man football, but they took 6-man football and made them 1A. So then
Right.
everybody moved up.
Right, right, right.
So yeah.
So you being a part of a team like Permian with all this tradition of winning, can you give me an idea of what the pressure is like? Is there a lot of pressure? I mean,
I think so.
uh,
I think as I was telling you that a lot of people don't realize the pressure that's put on you, and going from my junior year to my senior year, there was, you know, we had been successful. We had been successful. We had a brand new coach. We went 7-2, the only time in the 1980s that we missed the playoffs. And now I'm coming back for my senior year. Um, and it was like, I don't know. I mean, there's only 2 or 3 of us that were returning starters, and I was like, I think I'm going to quit. I mean, because the pressure is just so much. It's like I think I could just be happier not playing football. And of course, I'd talked to several people and stuff like that. And the next thing you know, they just told me, go out there and take it one day at a time. Go to practice, and if you hate it, after you play your first game, if you're not enjoying it, if you want to quit, my dad always told me, you can quit when it's no longer fun. Step away. But I
right.
was telling him, hey, it ain't fun. Well, my senior year was fun. So, uh, but I almost walked away from it before the season ever started.
Wow.
So,
So as I was reading the book a little bit, because I've been reading the book Friday Night Lights, when they talked about Booby and his uncle, they talked about how the town was kind of divided racially a little bit. And they also talked about later on in the maybe chapter 5, they were talking about your replacement after you left, the guy who was going to be the new fullback. And they kind of talked about how him and some of the players didn't get along, and some of the people in the town felt like maybe the black players got special treatment or whatever. Were there tensions between blacks and whites in Odessa at all? Or
I mean, I'm probably foolish in this regards, but to answer your question, the way I perceived it, I would say no.
okay,
Uh, Not at least on the team. I mean, clearly when the book got written, that author exposed things that were behind the doors that people don't see, and stuff like that. And to say that I think that kind of coincides with people's personalities, what you see isn't always who you know. You know
mm,
what I'm saying? Like,
right, right,
you can put on a smile and tell me we're buddies and we're friends, and when you're not around me, you might be insulting me all day long. But
right,
I didn't feel like that was when I was playing. I didn't feel like that was happening. I don't know if it was, and I'm speaking truly from my perspective of it, and I wasn't there. At this point I had graduated. I don't know if it was because Booby, who they had high expectations for, had gotten hurt, and that was causing problems, amongst the players. Because
right, right,
anybody who's played football can tell you that, if I tell you, hey man, you're my starting tailback, and you get hurt, and 3 weeks later or a month later, it appears that you're healthy, as a team, you're kind of going, why isn't he playing?
right, right, right,
So,
right.
but I can't tell you what happens in between that. I wasn't at the practices. I wasn't in the locker room. I didn't get that. So I don't know how they would have. I don't know.
Okay,
I'm just going to stick with, I don't know.
right, right,
I
right.
didn't feel like it was on my team, but it
Uh,
might have been. There might have been tensions like that.
right. So I'm gonna talk about the game you sent me, the when you guys played Arlington.
Yes.
I watched that whole game. And first of all, you had an amazing game, workhorse. I mean, you carried the team. I mean, your line was blocking really well, but you carried the ball over and over and over again. They knew you were getting the ball and they couldn't stop you. So during that game, you guys, at one point, you were down 28-7. At halftime, you were down 21-7. What is it like in the locker room when you guys go in and it's 21-7 down?
So strangely enough, one of the things we did that I recall, and some people may tell me I'm wrong here, but I remember the offense going in one section of the locker room, and the defense, I think they went into the shower. and I think there was some captains, there's some seniors basically laying it out like, I can tell you what was said on the offensive side, because we're going, man, we're being embarrassed. We're embarrassing ourselves. We're embarrassing our town, and we're embarrassing our tradition.
Right, right.
We knew our school had a tradition of coming back, and winning, and that's why they refer to the Mojo, the black magic,
Right, right.
So like, hey, we don't know what happened, but Mojo came back and won. Well, that's what we did. We as players, we were taking that upon ourselves as the captains to express to the team that this isn't over. So don't quit. I won't quit on you. Don't quit on me. There was the coaches then came out and they didn't yell at us. They didn't yell at all. They reemphasized what we were saying. It's been done before. It's in our genes. It's in our tradition. Let's just go take care of business. It's hard to convince a team that's down 21-7 that you're going to come back. We get the ball first. We turn it over. They score. Now we're down 28-7 and we're still going, what's going on?
Right, right.
We had a cornerback by the name of Jack Comia, and if you saw the game, you'll know what I'm talking about. In the third quarter, they ran on like a third down, I think it was. They tried to throw like an out, and our cornerback just absolutely lit that guy up.
Yeah, you heard him, yeah.
And I had told him before that play, I said, you get them off the field, the offense, we will. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
At home, and I got a dog in the office with me. I was telling him, I said, you get them off the field defensively and we will score the points. We will come back and we will win this game. We've got momentum. And he goes out there and lights that guy up, and next thing you know, our defense is stopping them, and now we're scoring points. So I didn't make myself a liar that day.
Right, right. So as I was listening to the announcer, he says a couple things. He says a lot of things. He's first of all, he's talking about how much bigger this team is than you guys. This Arlington team, you could see it on the film. They're definitely bigger across the lines. He says one thing about Permian is they never quit. And then he says, as you guys are coming back, he says, there's definitely something special about Permian. He said, I don't know what it is, but there's something special. So to you, what is that thing he was talking about?
I think it's because of where we're raised. To be quite honest, I think when you're out in West Texas, there's not a lot of it seems like there's not a lot of opportunity. Your opportunity is, hey, when I graduate high school, I'm going to go in the oil field. Don't get me wrong, there's good money in the oil field, real good money. But a lot of that can be very physically demanding work and stuff like that. And if your parents are doing it, your parents have a tendency to probably push a little bit of that on you. And and what I mean by that is, you get some attitude. So as a kid, your parents aren't necessarily politically correct in the way they discipline you, but it makes you a little bit tougher. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so, and then just out of pure, I don't know, desire and drive. It's like we're gonna, I'm gonna protect this with everything I got. I'm gonna show people how proud we are to be from Odessa. And in one of the state games, and I don't remember if it was 1984 or 1980, I remember listening to it on the radio, and one of the announcers referred to Odessa Permian as like a bunch of cockroaches. And it was like, what the heck? And he's like, yeah, man, they're just always here. Like, we can't seem to get rid of them. They're just always here. And they're undersized, and they're never, on paper, we're not supposed to be that good.
Right.
But the coaches were so disciplined and made us play as a team, like if like I was telling you, if the backside tackle missed a block on a play, they'd make us run it again and again and again. And they wanted to make sure that all 11 people were always doing their job.
Right, right.
And I think it translates in the fourth quarter. And the other thing is they conditioned us and conditioned us and conditioned. We ran and ran and ran and ran. And I think that's why come the fourth quarter, when a lot of these bigger teams would get tired, we were still running all around the field and hitting them and just swarming, you know?
Right. So something else the announcer said, so Arlington has, I think, I can't remember what his name was, but maybe Wilson is the running back from the other team. And they're saying like the matchup between Crow and Wilson. And then in the fourth quarter, when you just kept carrying the ball, I mean, I think one drive they gave it to you 5 or 6 times in a row, and you scored. And he makes a statement. It's clear that Shawn Crow is the best back in the state of Texas, because they just kept handing you that up the middle or pitching it to you. What was your mindset as the star player, and knowing that you're going to be the one that's like carrying the team, getting the ball? What was your mindset during those games?
I mean, being a senior, I definitely wanted the ball. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know how you can put it, but if your season's going to end, you want it to end on your shoulders. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And one of the things you can see on the film is, I think I got face masked or something like that, and they gave immediately. They didn't go to the guy that replaced me. They gave the ball to James Miles, and he goes for like 14 yards or 15 yards.
Right.
It ain't gonna lie to you. There was a time there when I was a little bit winded thinking, Coach, can you not give him the ball for a play or two? Like, I mean, man, you're killing me. But I will be a little arrogant. I did want the ball. I was a senior, and if my year was going to end, I wanted it to be on my shoulders, so.
Right. Could you tell, like, okay, when they didn't want to hit you no more, or like you just, because you were banging it in there, you were really, could you tell like some of them were kind of not wanting to hit you anymore, or could you sense that?
I wouldn't say that, but I took a different approach when I ran. When I was running the ball, I tried to punish the person tackling me. That's how I would do it. I was like, and what I mean by that is, if you're trying to tackle me in that last 2 or 3 yards, anybody who's ever run the ball knows that linebacker hit you so hard, he'll knock you off your feet. Right. So what I would do is I would actually take that advantage away from him, and I would cut, and I'd cut back into him. I would take the hit to him instead of letting him just get a free shot on me.
Right.
I figured it worked 2 ways. Hopefully it would wear him down and vice versa. If I could get away from him, if I could somehow slide away from him, it would benefit me even better, because I was hoping I could catch him unexpectedly, like, oh crap, he stepped into me, like, instead of trying to run away from him. That doesn't mean I didn't run away at times. I mean, if I was fast enough and I thought I could get away, I was taking that approach too. So, but I think in the film, you can see that I was definitely taking it to them. I wasn't. So,
what was the locker room like after that game?
Incredible. I mean, it's when you come back from down 28-7, and back then, like I said, the tiebreakers, we ended up in a 35-35 tie, but we advanced. I mean, the only team at that point who had beat us, that team beat them the week before 27-7. And they beat us. That team that we lost to beat us 42-21. So for us to kind of extract that little revenge, not only did we feel like, hey, we got revenge back on, like it felt like we got revenge on the team that had beat us, because we had some fumbles and things like that I think played a big part of that game. So, but in that particular game, we were on cloud 9.
Yeah. So Shawn, you look like you had some pretty nice wheels too, man. You were really fast. Did you run track a little bit too, you said?
Yeah, I ran track. Strangely enough, I ran, now my sophomore and junior year, I ran the the 4x100 and the 4x400. So I was on the sprint relay and the mile relay, and I
Okay.
ran the 110 high hurdles. And my senior year, we weren't getting any points in the 300, and we weren't getting any the 300 hurdles, and we weren't getting any points in the 200 meters because me and the other guy that was a senior, we were on the mile relay team, and you can only be on so many events. So we convinced the coach to let like a sophomore and a junior run on the mile relay team so that we could go run the 200 and the 300 hurdles to get more points as a team.
Right.
And it worked out. We didn't really miss a beat on the mile relay, and it saved me a whole bunch of 400s and 500s in practice.
Right. Right.
But yeah, and in my senior year, after the season was over, I got to represent the state of Texas in the Great Southwest out in Phoenix, Arizona, where I had a first, a second, and a third out there.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So after you're done playing sports or your senior year, I mean, you had an amazing year. So there's the recruiting that comes along with it. What was the recruiting process like for you? That whole experience of trying to get to the next level.
a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. You know, as a football player, you feel like if you put up certain numbers, you know, like statistics, because I just felt like, well, a coach might not be able to see the games, but the one thing they could do is open the paper and say, hey, in the state of Texas, this guy rushed for so many yards. And it's like, oh, wow, that's a lot of yards. Maybe we should at least look at him, talk to his coaches, get some film, something. Maybe that happens, but it sure felt like I was getting a lot of letters, wasn't getting a lot of offers. And that was kind of shocking to me. But I was also 170 pounds. And, you know, sometimes the other factor that goes into that is they're looking for the 6 foot, you know, 200-pound running back. Because in the 80s, in the colleges, the guys were running the ball a lot more. Today, they've proven you don't have to be 6 foot, 200 pounds. I mean, so I think that's, you know, that was one of the heartbreaking things about the whole recruiting process.
Did you end up going to play college ball anywhere?
I did get an offer from TCU and I took it. I stayed about 1.5 years. I had hurt my knee while I was in and stuff like that. But I think that bug of just kind of being tired from football kind of creeped back into my brain. And I was like, you know what? I'm not, you know, it's not here. I'm not feeling it.
Right.
And so at that point, I made a life decision, and I said, you know what? If I'm not going to play football, I mean, obviously my scholarship's gone. What are you going to do? I didn't come from money. My parents didn't have the means to pay for me to go to college. So I said, I'm going to go join the United States Marine Corps, and I'm going to get my own money to pay for college and, you know, and stuff like that. I did go to the Marine Corps. I did end up getting my bachelor's degree from the University of North Texas, and even went to graduate school for a few years. So, but now I work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm happy where I'm at.
Right. Would you say there's a letdown from going from like a town like Odessa, where you're like, I mean, you're basically, it's like you're a professional football player, to going to college and not being that guy? Is there a letdown, you think?
Oh, I think there's a huge letdown. You know, you go from, you know, like, and at the high school level in Odessa, you know, the news crews would come out every Tuesday or Wednesday and interview you before the game on Friday. And, you know, if they're not interviewing somebody on the team and, you know, stuff like that. And you go to college and it's like, they're not even mentioning your name. You don't even know if you're on the radar, you know?
Right.
I think some people as fans, they probably kind of are like, hey, you know, we recruited this kid, we signed him, where is he? You know? And in the back of your brain, you're going, why am I not starting? Why am I not the second string guy? Why, I'm only a freshman, but why am I not getting to step out on that field? I can help.
Right.
is your mentality. And when you don't get that opportunity and they're like, oh no, we're going to redshirt you, you know, you're not going to play this year. You're kind of like,
Right.
and I think it drains you, and it because it makes you go from feeling like you're a rock star to who are you? Am I a
Right.
has been? Am I, but that's where you have to kind of remember, you gotta earn it. You're no longer the fastest guy on the field. Now everybody on the field's as fast as you.
Yeah.
So you got to make it take advantage of every opportunity you got to get stronger, better, faster. Um,
So,
that's kind of how I looked at it.
so as I'm reading the book Friday Night Lights, a couple of your teammates got pretty much entire chapters in the book.
Oh yeah.
So we got James Booby Miles, and then the quarterback Mike Winchell. What are your memories of those guys?
I had the most up respect for both of them. They were both juniors. So the quarterback and the tailback were both juniors. That's why their expectations were so high the next year. Mike was pretty quiet. Booby was very outgoing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't have anything bad to say about any of them. Mike Winchell was kind of quiet to himself. But to me, he was a hell of a quarterback.
Right.
You know, he didn't have to throw the ball a lot with me and Miles in the backfield.
Right. Right.
He probably didn't like that, but he was a great guy, and when we needed him to throw the ball, he was outstanding. I mean, in my opinion, you've got a running back who runs for 2,288. Your tailback rushes for 1,360 something yards or 70 yards, and your quarterback's throwing for over 1,000. Pretty good balance in the scheme of things, and by running the ball, you could control the clock. And I think Mike did a real good job of managing, because he always had the option to audible a play. He did that. Our quarterback, when he went up there, if he saw something, he could audible it. He did not have to run what was called.
Right.
And he did a good job when he would. If you look in the, you were saying you're watching the movie. I think it was in the first quarter when we were down. I had like a 40-yard run down the left side. That was
Right.
actually an audible. He actually changed it to that play.
Okay.
So that was, yeah.
So
But
when I
yeah,
was
I like both of them.
right.
I didn't have a problem with either one of them.
When I was looking at Booby on your when you guys in that Arlington game, I mean, he looked like he was. I don't know. From what I seen, he looked like if he wouldn't have got hurt, he probably could have. I mean, he could have did something at the big time level. He had the size, like you said, they were looking for. I mean, what do you think? If he hadn't got hurt, do you think he could have went far in football?
Tough question to answer because, you know, ideally I would tell you yes. I think he had an opportunity because of the size and stuff like that to go somewhere. Um, High school football players being stars in high school and translating into college and going to the pros, the numbers just get smaller and smaller and
Right.
smaller.
Right.
He definitely had what I didn't, which was size. You
Mhm.
know, if I'd have had his size and those numbers, they'd have been beating down my door, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
But at 170 pounds versus 200 pounds or 198 pounds, yeah, that was a little bit different. Uh, but yeah, I think he would have had a shot to definitely make it to the pros because he just the sheer size of him.
Right.
So
Right. So what are your thoughts about the movie Friday Night Lights? When you watch it, what are your thoughts about the whole movie and that thing?
Hollywood definitely did what they needed to do to make a movie because they got it wrong on every level. And the only reason I say that is because I take it personal. I knew these guys. I knew James Miles. I knew Ivory Christian. I knew everybody in that movie that was a senior. I knew them,
Mm-hmm.
and to tell the story the way they were telling it and making them lose to teams that they beat and making them go to state versus a team that they lost to in the state semifinals. I mean, to me, I'd have a hard time in that gray area, you know. Yeah, it
Right.
makes a great movie, but I was actually saw where James Miles was actually trying to defend himself on Facebook because the movie they made his number 45. Well, Chris
Okay.
Comer was 45. He was 35. And
Mm.
there's people arguing with him, about wanting him to sign jerseys and stuff like that. And he's like, but I was 35. And
Right.
the person is arguing with him saying, no, no, James Miles was 45. You're wrong. And I'm thinking, man, are you kidding me? You're gonna argue with the man who's telling you my real number was 35.
Right. Right.
Hollywood
Right.
made it 45. I can't do nothing about that, you know?
Right. Right.
That's kind of why I have problems with the movie because they take a certain perception, like a father. As we were talking earlier, a father coming out there and grabbing somebody. I think it was Billingsley, they showed like his father grabbing his face mask and jerking him around. And when I was there's no way our coaches would have allowed that. No
Right.
way. I'm not saying that his dad, maybe he did do it, but to my knowledge, I'm going to say no because
Right.
um, our coach Gary Gaines was very much a very Christian man, and he was just like, "No, you're not going to cuss. If every now and then you might get your hand smashed like between a helmet or a shoulder pad, and if you said a cuss word, off you were running. You weren't,
Mm.
he didn't tolerate it. And he's like, "You're not going to cuss out here. You're not."
Right.
And so I held high respects for him and the way he ran the shop, and I think having the same coaches for so many years also made us successful. You know, yeah,
Right.
we weren't doing a turnover every 2 or 3 years with either the whole coaching staff or whatever. When the new coach came in, he came in, and I think a defensive coordinator came in, and that was the two coaches that changed.
Mm. Okay.
Outside of that, year in and year out, it was the same offensive line coach, the same defensive line coach, the same, DB coach, defensive
Right.
coordinator, stuff like that. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that's what made us successful too.
Right. So Sean, something I think we talked about the other day, and I've kind of noticed this myself, and with a lot of athletes, maybe like in my own hometown, um, you put so much emphasis on the sport and being successful in your sport, but you don't like develop another pathway in life. And then, like after the sports are done, a lot of guys just don't have anything else. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's huge because the one thing I can take from it is I don't ever recall anybody talking to me saying, "Hey, football ain't going to last forever. You need to have an education,"
Right. Right.
And when I walked away from TCU, I realized real quick, oops, maybe maybe I should have stayed and got the education. It would
Right.
have been. Of course, I did finish. I did go back to school. I just didn't finish from TCU, but
Right. Right.
um, I know the every time I have an opportunity now to talk to a young kid who's coming up, whether he's the star of the team or whether he's you know, the guy who's third string hoping to be playing in college, it's like, dude, get your education, get
Hmm.
the education,
Right.
and I feel like I wish more schools would have more people in place to help with that transition. I mean, what I mean by that is I was watching a show about the IMG Academy out of Florida, and I
Okay.
think they have like one or two people, if not maybe more than that, on their staff, like in the office, that's what
Right.
they do. They
Mhm.
talk to the kids and they like, hey, you've got to have a certain GPA, you've got to have a certain SAT score, you've got to have, this is what it's going to take to get you to Division 1. Do you want to go
Right.
Division 1? So they're not just telling them from an aspect of that. Yes, they're telling them what you got to do to get to the Division 1 school, but they're also telling them you need this GPA, you need this SAT score, and they're telling them early.
Right. Right.
It's hard to tell a kid when he's a senior, hey man, you've got to get an SAT score. You can't go to college. And then you're looking at him with these big old eyes going, what? You know, that should have bbeen something that happened in ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. There should have been somebody going, hey guys, as a team collectively, but the IMG Academy in the episode I saw, they were pulling them in individually and
Right,
talking
right.
to them. They weren't doing it as a team. They're saying, this is what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of felt like, that would have been nice. Now we did have a guy, they had a guy, Brian Chavez, who ended up going to Harvard.
Okay.
And he became a lawyer. He's big time. I mean, he was a great athlete. He was mean on the football field.
Right,
And
right.
but I believe he graduated. I don't know this for sure, but I believe he graduated first in law school, and I believe he graduated first in his, in his whatever his degree was at Harvard. That's what I've heard. So, and I
Right.
don't doubt it. The man was probably the smartest man I've ever met. So, um, my hat goes off to him. He got that right. He knew
Right,
that,
right.
football, and that's a great probably example, because Chavez was, he wasn't your typical 6'5", 265-pound tight end. So he wasn't going to go pro, I mean,
Right.
he wasn't. He knew his education. He knew what football was, and then he knew where the education would take him. And that's exactly what he did. And I hats off to him. So,
Right. Shawn, was there any like all state or all conference or any of that for you when you played?
yeah, I don't think I was. I wanted to say I was all state as a junior, but I don't think I was. But I definitely got the MVP and the first team running back for the state my senior year.
Okay.
So
All right.
um, I saw it not that long ago, because I was just kind of curious how I when it, they Texas does two things kind of strange, and I don't know that they give you a certificate or anything like that for it, but to be the state's leading rusher, I believe you have to do it at the end of your regular season. So you had like 3 non-conference games and then your 7 district games or something
Uh,
like that. Total of 10 games. And we couldn't get nobody to play us. So
mm,
we only played 9 games.
mm,
So when the totals came out at the 10th game, of course, I was 10 yards shy, and I was 100 carries less.
wow. Wow.
So I wasn't considered the state's leading rusher, because, and then in our very first game, which would have given me 10 games,
Right.
I rushed for 225 yards. So, you know, but they do keep a running total. And when the season was over, because we did make it to the state semifinals, um, I want to say I was probably 400 yards or 500 yards in front of the next closest person in the 5A division.
Okay.
So, when all the dust settled, I was the leading rusher, but I don't know that they take that, because, of course, not everybody makes it to the state semifinals.
Right, right, right.
So,
They just do the regular season.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So once again, everybody, this today we're happy to have Shawn Crow, Odessa Permian legend. If you don't know, that's the school that they depicted the film Friday Night Lights. I'd like to thank Shawn for being here today. Shawn, is there anything else you want to share before we leave?
I just, to any athlete out there, just, give it your all, enjoy it, because it goes quick. And, you know, hang your head high when you walk off the field, knowing that you gave 100%, and do the same in life.
Thank you, Shawn. We appreciate you. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you.
Have a great one.
You too.